Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Racing Show here at RacePlazaMedia. My name is Pia, and today I want to talk to you about my top 3 moments of the MotoGP races this weekend. Of course, we had a feature race on Sunday, and then we also had the sprint race on Saturdays. All those races were held at the Aragon track in Spain, which is famously a low grip track with a lot of left corners, which are 2 track characteristics that Marc Marquez prefers or is pretty good at. So I was going into this weekend curious to see if he will finally take the top step of the podium again. But without much further ado, let's talk about my first highlight of the race. And interesting enough, this race weekend, the sprint race and the feature race mirrored each other almost a little bit. Starting with the start, both times we had Marc Marquez starting at the top. We had Pedro Acosta on the front row as well as Pecco Bagnaia. And both times Pecco Bagnaia had issues with the start. The wheels were turning under him, but he couldn't really get away. He even interfered with some other people's start, or some of the other riders had to evade him because he was not leaving a lot of track behind him, so he immediately lost several positions right from the get-go, which of course made his race a lot more difficult. And also keeping in mind that Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia are both very close in this title fight, so any and all points matter. So it was really interesting that this happened to Pecco on both races, so for the sprint and for the feature race. On the other hand, both Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez had an excellent start, and Jorge Martin was right there with them at the start. Going to highlights for number 2. So this one is a little bit bigger because, of course, we had a lot of on-track action. And there's one big moment I want to focus this point on, but I want to give you a couple of honorable mentions before we get to the major point of my number 2 highlight. First off, what I wanted to say is at the feature race start, I saw pretty close to the top. I would say like in the top 10, I saw Oliveira with the Trackhouse team, which is not somebody I see very often in that first group of 10 riders. So I was very surprised to see him there. I was very excited to see him there. However, in the first lap, he unfortunately crashed out. Outside of him, we had a lot of great racing. A focus mostly on the feature race here. Morbidelli was really close to the front for a while, which was really nice to see as well. Then we saw some really fun racing between Pedro Acosta and Jorge Martin, which also got really, really close. I was really worried because both of them have crashed out a couple of times this season already. And as mentioned, for Jorge Martin specifically, any point really counts. And I was hoping that Pedro Acosta will have a little bit of a resurgence because he had a really great start into the season. Then it dipped a little bit for him. So I'm glad to see him back fighting for the podium again. But my main point for this number 2 highlight is, of course, and I'm sure you've heard about this if you're a MotoGP fan, it's all over the internet. It's the incident that happened in lap 19. So Pecco Bagnaia and Alex Marquez crashed each other out. And I mean, there's a lot of controversy, a lot of different opinions happening. Going into turn 19, Alex had made a mistake, so he went a little bit wide. Then Pecco Bagnaia came around him, cut him. I think he cut him off a little bit, coming into the inside. It's really difficult to see once you're on the inside already, as in Alex Marquez. You're on the right side of the bike. You're not paying attention to what's going on necessarily on the other side. You're focusing on down your turn where you're going to next. But then when he was bringing his bike back up, Pecco was right in front of him. They touched, and after that, it looked very, very nasty. I mean, I was seriously concerned. I'm sure many people who saw it live or had seen any of the footage, and I'll put the footage here so you can see it as well. It looked very tough because Pecco looked like he was stuck under the bike for quite some time with the heavy bike on top of him going through the gravel. But luckily, both of the riders were able to stand back up afterwards and they seemed to be okay. Alex Marquez has a little muscle stiffness, he said, on his leg. Pecco is in some pain, specifically his neck area, he said. Of course, both riders are blaming the other person for the overall inciting incident going into this. The commentators originally said it was a racing incident. So I'd be very curious to know what you guys think about this incident. I think, and this is probably not going to be a very popular opinion, I think Pecco was probably a little bit more at fault here because he was cutting off Alex, who was already on his line, because he was going in front of the bike and Alex really didn't have anywhere else to go. Yes, he could have gone off the throttle maybe a little bit more than he did at that point, but Pecco could have also given him more space, especially because he was already on the inside for the next upcoming turn where he could have completed his overtake. I think he was maybe a little bit rushing this move because he was so far back. He had this horrendous start. Yet again, he had a lot of places to make up, and this overtake would have brought him back onto the podium. However, he had another 4 laps to make that move again, to make it onto the podium, because also I don't think there was a chance really for him to make it to Jorge Martin, because at that point, if I'm not mistaken, there were already 10 seconds between Alex and Jorge Martin. So there was not really a time or enough laps left over for Pecco to make the second place, but at least he would have made it onto the podium and earned some very, very important points for the championship. However, now that he crashed out, he didn't get any points for this race, for the feature race. He got a couple for the sprint race, but he was also not on the podium for it, so he didn't get the good amount of points that he really needed. So now, because of this big crash out, because Pecco losing all these points, he's now 23 points behind Jorge Martin in the overall standing for this MotoGP Driver Championship. Yes, there's still a couple more races to go. However, every point counts. And of course, neither of them are planning on crashing out anymore. They're always very close. So these 23 points definitely hurt Pecco and help Jorge Martin quite a bit. And that leads me into our highlight point number 3, the podium for this weekend's races. And the podiums were exactly the same. It was a Spanish sweep. We have in third place, we had Pedro Acosta. I was so happy to see the rookie back on the podium. Then we had in second place, we had Jorge Martin, earning him very, very important points for the title championship. And then in first place, the number, where is it here? 93, Marc Marquez is finally back on the top step of the podium. It happened in the sprint race and also in the feature race. It's been a very, very long time coming. It's been 1,043 days since his last win, and he got a double win this weekend. His 60th MotoGP win ever in his career. I mean, what a feat. And it's just so nice to see, especially doing it in Spain. And then he went to his grandstand where his fan club is, and celebrated with him. And that's one of my favorite things that I'm discovering for MotoGP this season, that the riders go to the fans, they engage with the fans, they throw their gloves in there when they're at their home races, or when they see somebody with a great sign, they go up to the grandstands when they have their final, their outlap essentially, and they celebrate with them. We see that quite often. Jorge Martin has done it, Pecco has done it, and Marc Marquez, of course, done it because he loves celebrating. I love seeing him dance and just let loose. It makes me excited and very curious, not only how the remainder of this season will go for him, but also how the next season will go once he's a teammate with Pecco Bagnaia. All right, folks, these are all of my highlights of the MotoGP race this weekend. Please chime in the comments and let me know if I missed any of your highlights, what you thought about the Alex and Pecco incidents. Which side are you on, or do you think it was truly a racing incident? But don't you worry, we have next weekend MotoGP will be back for the Italian Grand Prix, where they will be racing at the Misano track. So I'm very excited that we don't have to wait much longer for the boys to be back racing. So just this upcoming weekend, so stay tuned for that. We will definitely do another recap for that race. But in the meantime, keep an eye out for our Thursday video where we will tell you all the racing that you can watch this upcoming weekend, including, of course, MotoGP, but all the other racing. And let me tell you, there's lots of racing happening again this September. So just keep an eye out for that. If you don't want to wait as long, check out our website, RacePlazaMedia.com, where you can find the free calendar of racing for the month of September, including links to the series, as well as links to different streaming options. And with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys again here on Thursday for our weekly What to Watch video. Bye-bye.